Hi all, let's make the Sicilian defence great again and know all about those pesky, annoying anti-Sicilian variations. So continuing that theme, let's have a look at another game. I'm going to flip the board. Stockfish 11 versus Leela 62076. The opening scene set is this variation: e4, Sicilian defence, knight c3, knight c6, and now bishop b5. So this is super annoying and unusual, just to get the player with the black pieces out of their book usually, and to make the positions less fun, less dynamic, less tactical. I was on the black side against Grandmaster Neil MacDonald back in 1993. He played a similar kind of system: f4 first, after g6, knight f3, bishop g7. He played bishop b5 here. And I played knight d4, and it was a reasonably good position from a technical point of view. This seemed to me like, intuitively, like congestion. What is this strange stuff? I played d5, which is a good move, and I played, I believe, another good move, even checking with the latest engines. This is a reasonably good idea, but I didn't continue on a dynamic path here with knight takes f6, because white really has congestion issues. And I think when you play these variations with black, and white's going to play these weird systems, look at the pieces, how happy they are, not just the material if you're going to lose a pawn, because there's major congestion. In the game, I played bishop takes f6, and there was a disastrous turnaround here off to c3. This is a disastrous move, and white unraveled, taking here, weakening this diagonal, snagging this pawn, because now there's queen h5 as well. And I kind of missed that point. Maybe I was half asleep that day as well. And white's got a massive advantage from the opening. That was absolutely terrible. But it turns out here that if I just played knight takes f6, and look how happy the pieces are instead, this position, black actually has really good play. In fact, black is close to winning, it seems, according to the latest engines. This kind of dynamic where black's a pawn down, but white has this awkward development. Black could intensify the pressure, and it's just major disaster for white here potentially. That sort of thing. Yeah, it could have been a nightmare for white if I had played very dynamically and creatively and not worried too much about material. It's very difficult to do though, especially when you're playing against the grandmaster opponent. But this line we're looking at is with the immediate bishop b5, so not f4, but just in case you do get this weird combination f4, knight f3, and bishop b5, you've got to watch out for that stuff. But here in this game we have bishop b5, knight d4, and yes, white can't take on d4. The bishop just is happy to go back in this line. e6, knight f3, and now I'm just ignoring that, actually letting white take on d4. Potentially it looks like it's a weakened pawn, but it would be difficult for white not to, there's pressure on e4, for example. So white castles here. But let's have a look at knight takes d4 for a moment, just to show concretely. Knight takes e4, knight takes d4. In fact, black has a nice resource in this position. If I give you 5 seconds, what would you play here? Okay. Knight takes f2 is nice with this queen h4 check, striking at the king, getting the king to come to e3. This is a nasty pin. And this position, just casually castle, there's all sorts of nice possibilities. For example, like this, just playing for d5 and e5. And look, there's vicious bishop g4 here coming up. So this kind of thing just unravels as really, really bad for white if knight takes d4 here. So the book line continues with castling. So this is a core recommendation of that free short and sweet course you might want to check out. Kingscrusher TV /free Anti-Sicilian. We're still inside the line for a moment. a6, d3. You might think, well, hold on. What about trying to give the bishop a pigeonhole on a2 or taking? Let's concretely look at a5. The problem then, forget b5, d5 is nice, with the idea that, in fact, if the bishop goes back there, we've opened up this bishop. Bishop g4, there is a check there, but this ends up being very nice for black. Again, pieces versus material just cause unhappiness here, congestion on the queen side, and black's absolutely got a delightful position. It can even get back some material with this kind of tactic and be absolutely fine. So a3 doesn't really help matters for white. Knight takes d4. Again, we could just take on e4, and again, it's really quite nice. It's at least equal. So we have d3, b5, bishop b3. So the question is here, what about this dynamic play white might have on the a file? Just don't worry about it. Get the bishop, so you got the bishop pair. A takes, bishop b7, and this is the end of the book line given by Grandmaster Alex Kolovich. And it looks as though, yeah, black's got that bishop pair, and bishop b7 has also protected the rook, because if we play something else, then there is the annoying knight takes b5, for example. So yeah, we've got to protect the rook to avoid that knight takes b5 tactic. Once we do that, it's a logical move anyway. So does Stockfish 11 find any amazing resources for white in this position? Is there something peculiar about it? Or is it simply that black's intuitively better, as we might suspect with the bishop pair? So we have e5. So is this an annoying central pawn wedge? In fact, b4 is played, not moving the knight. So b4, very energetic. We have knight a4. Otherwise, you know, perhaps white is going to make use of knight e4 after knight d5. There are possibilities. So this is at least preventing that by counter-attacking this knight. Now, knight a4 is played here. If e takes here, b takes, and this position is more than fine for black. That long-range bishop, we can inflict structural damage, and this is great for black. If we look at that again, this position, if f takes g7, again, this is nice for black as well, as you might suspect. In fact, rook g8 is appropriate here, looking at that king, looking at that pin, and black's absolutely fine. So we have actually Stockfish playing knight a4, and now we have knight d5, and now knight g5. Is this quite dangerous for the black king? We have actually f5 being played. Very, very interesting move, f5. On h6, maybe you know, knight e4, and this position, white's getting a small edge. This is a very dangerous thing to do in principle with the king still in the centre. It looks dangerous, so forget that stuff. So f5 seems altogether much safer. We have now f4. Now, it's interesting. This is quite committal from white to establish this central pawn wedge. And the other aspect here is that this pawn chain is underminable in theory with a g5 later. And you can imagine g5 might actually assist either getting a semi-open h file or a g file sometimes. So this is actually going to be, in theory, in a theoretical sense, it's a kind of lever that's been provided structurally for a g5 undermine. The undermine will open up things, usually, that kind of undermine in principle. But can it actually be proven here against, you know, the mighty Stockfish 11? So remember, it's a 3 minute with 2 second increment time control. We have actually bishop c6 being played. If white, by the way, had played e takes, then knight takes. This should be fine, this position, with queen h4. This is quite nice for black. Should be even. There's even a threat of mate, which has to be parried. It should be fine for black. So f4. So white has a certain space advantage in the centre of that wedge. Bishop c6 is played. Knight f3. Bishop e7. And now queen e1. Where is this queen going? We have h6. Queen g3. Yes, a concrete threat. But Leela just plays king f7. And we're still looking forward to inferior g5 here now. Bishop d2. Rook g8, as if g5 is really on the cards. h4 trying to clamp down. Queen c7. Queen f2. Looking at c5. But this is actually ignored with a5. It's too dangerous here to take that pawn. Rook fd1 was played. You might wonder, what happens on taking the pawn? Okay, so if taking the pawn, can you see what black plays here? If I give you 5 seconds. Simple and strong. just bishop b5, putting more pressure on the c file, putting more pressure on the knight. If d4, then we can just take the rook. We just take that rook. That's great. If knight a4, we do dare to take on c2. There's no big penalty here. The black rooks are connected after all. d3 is weak, b3 is weak. It's fine for black. So rook fd1 was played, not taking on c5. Now queen a7, officially protecting c5. King h2. It's an interesting position. If c4, I mean, you can see that white hasn't got too many strategic pawn breaks. g4 is currently unimaginable, although the king is on the f-file, but it's not really, it's difficult to show g4. But what about c3 or c4? We can check out c4, but it kicks the knight. It's not really a pawn break to look forward to. Black could actually take here and use that b-file. This, for example, is a lot of pressure on the white position. You can see that's a nasty pin as well on the knight. This kind of scenario, for example, g5 could happen. Even the queen side could be used. It could get nasty quickly like this, and this could be a disaster on h1 as a scenario, fictional scenario. So anyway, white is not interested in c4. We do have this kind of stranded knight on a4 as well. The pieces are not that happy for white here, and the pawn breaks are not very happy either. So both this knight and the lack of pawn breaks is a bit of a miserable aspect, you could argue, of the white position. King h2, and now a really amazingly powerful move is played here, and it's difficult to really kind of I think truly understand the full impact, the implication of this. But can you guess what black plays if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video? So black to play here. Okay, knight takes f4. Now it is towards the centre of this pawn. If black ever gets the piece back and has to use the g-pawn, it's basically swapped an f-pawn for a g-pawn and opens up a road, the g-file, to the king. We have after bishop takes f4, g5, and it's running with tempo the idea of g4, g3 check, potentially, if the bishop's going to g3. But it's very, very difficult. If the bishop goes to g3, there's f4. This is the thing. White chooses bishop e3 here. Let's look at some alternatives. Pardon me. If hg, this opens up the h-file, this position. But there's also f4 to look forward to, but h-file after. So that will be absolutely great for black. If knight takes g5, trying to give a piece back straight away, the black rooks just coordinate very, very nicely. And look at black's gorgeous position. c4, discovered check. This is just really absolutely gorgeous. The pressure here on the white position is very difficult to parry. Indeed, this very, very nice battery here. It's absolutely beautiful stuff. All the queen coming back over here. It's really dangerous. So we have actually, instead of anything else, we do actually have bishop e3. And after g4, remember, black's taken out the f-pawn and is basically swapping for the g-pawn once this takes. So basically we've increased the central power of the black pawns as well as opening another file and fragmenting the white pawn structure a bit. Because after bishop f4, well, if knight e1, that runs into g3 check, just picking up the queen. Thanks very much, and that's going to be fantastic for black. So after g4, bishop f4, g takes. Yeah, the pawns have been fragmented a little bit, so that's a very weak pawn. There's a nice g-file. There's still the bishop pair. There's still the knight on the rim, which is dim, as the expression goes. The knight on the rim is dim. Okay, so we have actually, instead of g takes, if g3, then it's not good to leave that pawn on f3, basically, as you might imagine. Something like this, and then rook g2 check is crushing. So g takes f3. So the positional trump cards are increasing for white slightly. And this pawn has to be supported by a piece. That's an extra liability on that piece as well from before. we have c4 offering the exchange of queens now. So not minding queens coming off. You might think, well, black's got some sort of attacking position. Forget it. There's other trump cards here to play with. So queen takes, yeah, the queen threatens. Rook takes. So if we take stock here, with the departure of that queen, well, this pawn's hanging, this pawn's hanging. These pawns are under fire, and this knight on the rim is still dim. If we have, so bishop e3 was played. If b takes c4, it seems here actually there's a powerful move before white has a chance to play b3 for black to activate the b file as well with this pawn sack here. Fascinating stuff. Technically, if we look at this position, black's only got 5 pawns, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But sorry, 6, 3, 4, 5. Black is, look at the black pieces though, they're super happy. So, you know, knight c3, rook takes. a4 is going to be difficult to parry. If knight takes a4, then this is a nasty pin on the rook on a1. Otherwise, you know, just taking this one, and black all of a sudden is going to be up on material soon. So yeah, up on material there by a pawn. So yeah, this is very, very bad news, this b3, if that happens. So you know, that would lift up this liberate this b pawn. So in fact here, also maybe black didn't want to give the e4 square potentially after taking, and the bishop could pop back to e4. So in fact this was left there intact. Bishop e3 hitting the rook. The rook moves. Actually it's here d takes c4 is played. So potentially, you know, the e4 square could be useful to black. Again, if b takes c4, b3 is very nice. This position, very, very nice for black positioning. So d takes c4, bishop takes f3. So black can hook into that e4 square now without a pawn on d3. The positional trump cards are really growing, it seems, still at a small rate. Knight c5, black cashes out a bit with bishop takes h4. We have knight takes d7 hitting the rook. Rook bc8. So a fascinating position here. It looks far too dangerous to try and take on a5 here. Rook a f1 was played. If we for a moment look at rook takes a5, the two bishops lurking around the king is bad news. Rook takes g1, for example, rook g8 check. This position with the rook coming to the second rank, the 7th rank from black's perspective. Black's got a massive advantage there. If we look at this, if king h2 here, sorry, if king h2 there, rook g2 check, bishop g3 is sufficient there, and then f4 to support the bishop, and now we're threatening things like rook h2, mating. Doesn't matter about any discovered check here. It's very dangerous for the white king, more than for the black king. So we have actually rook a f1, bishop c6 hitting the knight, knight f6. And yeah, we go into this opposite coloured bishop ending, which you might think, doesn't this hold some hope of a draw for white? Black has transformed the advantages here into two mobile passed pawns. If we look at this, we can say this. If you're into programming languages, you know, the higher level we can speak, you know, the battle of abstraction, the more powerful we can sometimes program. And here on the chessboard, you know, we can say now, this is a high level concept. We have the two connected passed pawns with great pawn mobility. It transcends, you know, technical calculation quite often. Just growing these advantages. But you know, the opposite colour bishops, do they actually help black here though? Because black is much stronger now on the light squares. Sometimes it can be used to increase the attack prospects, having the opposite colour bishops. So rook takes, yeah, with the nasty rook g2, that's parried. If bishop takes, that actually, black just changed tune here. Forget rook g2, there's a nasty pin here. Rook h8 snapping up that bishop. So we have rook g1, rook takes, king takes. Is it really that bad for white, this endgame? Well, yes. Why has black got two connected passed pawns and white's pawn is blockaded? It's because there's two sets of double pawns here as well. We could remark in a high-level English way, there's two sets of double pawns. Black's pawn mobility is much greater here. We have also another outside passed pawn here as well. There's basically three passed pawns versus a blockaded pawn. It's hopelessly lost. But you might think, hold on a sec, these pawns are on dark squares, they're about to be munched. It's not that simple. There's a4 for a start. So bishop b6, a4. And we have now check. The king goes to e5, bishop e7. A takes, bishop e4, which promises to win potentially this b3 pawn. But actually bishop d3 is played, not going for the b3 pawn. There's bigger fish to fry, so to speak, here. After this move bishop d3, we're looking at trying to queen these pawns with the priority. So king f2, f4, king e1, king f5. You can just imagine now the deliciousness of playing a pawn to e3, playing this to f2, and kicking the king out and queening the pawn. That's the basic idea. We have bishop c5, e5, king d2, e4, bishop g1, king g4, king c3, bishop b1, king d2, king f3. This is a really aggressive king, herding these pawns. So e3 check. Now bishop d3, just in case this bishop needs to blockade this runner. So it kicks the runner to c7 to blockade, to stop it to prevent it queening there. And there's always a light square blockade. If these pawns come like this, there's a light square blockade. But by contrast, here, black's got enough to tilt white over the edge here because of the aggressive king and the outside passed pawn, whilst these two can be blockaded. The blockading difference is the final decisive advantage here, it seems, in the position. To blockade or not to blockade, that is the question. Bishop c8, b5, h4, bishop h2, e4, ready to roll. Bishop g1, h3, tying up the bishop. I've been looking at the classic Shirov endgame with bishop h3 recently, and there was a terrible bishop in that game in the Shirov masterpiece, which you might have seen. Bishops are not so good when it comes to this kind of scenario, except if they're blockading like this. King f3, bishop h2, king f2, yep, with the idea of e2, e1. And that is basically it. Black's queening. It's difficult to parry all of this. The game continued for a bit longer here, and now it was resigned, auto-resigned. So really magnificent game there. It's difficult to really tell why was it made to look so simple. I think black played like Bruce Lee. Black water in this game, didn't mind the kind of kingside attack potential, but didn't mind just endgames, even if the queens got exchanged. Didn't mind just what seemed to be a very thin advantage of extra mobile pawns. Black's pawns easier to blockade. That's what it came down to. Pawns that were easier to blockade versus more mobile pawns for oneself. So that makes the game beautifully flowing like water. Take what advantages suggest themselves naturally, which are still potentially decisive advantages in the end. So a wonderful game there, positional masterpiece, even at this time control. Hope you got something from it. And yeah, let's try and bring back the fun to the Sicilian defence. So there's a free, short and sweet Anti-Sicilian course, Kingscrusher TV, free Anti-Sicilian. We must get prepared in these terribly boring lines that will be thrown at us if we want to play the fun Sicilian defence. We can get prepared. We can research this stuff. Okay. Thanks very much.